right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a special episode of Big Time the Podcast. It's NCAA Tournament Week, and I've caught March. I was going to say March Fever. It's not March Fever. I've caught the madness, whatever you want to call it. March Madness. It's here. I'm ready to go. And we brought in a special guest, and her title, we're going to go with the Big Time Hoops College Basketball Insider. Emily Esposito is here. So yeah, she's our exclusive college basketball insider, and she's going to help us break down March Madness. But it's exciting for multiple reasons. One being the women's game has just exploded over the last couple of years in terms of popularity. But two, we have a lot of connections with the state of Maine in both the men's tournament and the women's side this year. So, Emily, how are you feeling? I mean, I think when the games kick off tomorrow, I think, right, is the open, or maybe the first four is tonight for the women, but it's here. How are you feeling?
Yes. I'm feeling nervous for the teams in general, just because it is kind of up in the air, but obviously that makes it more exciting for us. So I'm excited. I'm just nervous for my friends who are playing in it, and their teams, because this is a time of year that when they say literally anything can happen, anything can happen.
And you heard it first, guys. She just said her friends who are playing in the tournament. So that's why she's our insider. She's got the inside information here. She's going to break it all down for us. But for you, from your experience, so you've seen it from both sides as a player, right? At Villanova, then BU. And so you've seen it from a big time school to a mid-major. And it's a little bit different on both sides, right? So when you're at one of these big Power 5 schools, you want to get to the tournament and you want to make some noise. Whereas at a mid-major, winning your conference championship and then just getting to the big dance is a success. So as a player, what was it like being in both situations? And as a coach last year, as a grad assistant at Arizona, right? What's it like being at one of these big time programs where you want to make a run of success versus you just want to win your conference tournament and get to the NCAA tournament?
Yeah. So at Nova, my first year I was there, we were in the top 15. We had a great run. We didn't lose until like just after Christmas. So it put us in a ranked position. We had beat Duke that year, who was really good. They had Lexi Brown, Becca Greenwell. So then we got a bid, and it actually set us up perfectly in terms of the region we were in. We went and we played at Notre Dame. Our first game was SDSU, very well coached. We ended up winning first round against them. Second round, of course, we played Notre Dame. That's the year all 5 of their starters go to the WNBA. That's the year they win the national championship. But I will say we were either tied at halftime or up 1 at halftime. And before the game, so this is like some of the behind the scenes of what happens in March Madness. They had a girl who was supposedly out for ankle injury reasons. Nothing was extremely specified, which happens a lot. And she didn't play the first half. I think they thought it was going to be like an easy game. Okay, this how we were seated. Because it was the way it was going into halftime, they then pull her out of her restrictions at halftime. And now all of a sudden we have someone who can guard our point guard, who was like one of the best in the country at that time. So like, it really is a chess match in March Madness, and people will pull kind of whatever cards work best. And then we obviously end up losing to them. And then fast forward to BU, it is I don't think people understand. Yes, it's hard to even just get a bid, especially with whatever conference you're in. Like right now, the ACC is unreal. They have the most ranked teams for women's. SEC, obviously, Power 5. They have a pretty good conference with South Carolina leading the way. But for those mid-major teams that you were talking about, I don't think people understand how hard it is to win your conference, right? Even if you are the best, because it's one game. You have to win each game leading up to it, go undefeated in the postseason, to then hopefully get a decent bid to the NCAA tournament, or a decent ranking to kind of like place you up well. And then yeah, for Arizona, it was tough for us because the other factor that comes into play, right, is last year at Arizona, we played Pac-12, so most of the stuff is on the West Coast. We're used to that kind of travel. But now our region, we played at Maryland last year. So the girls have whatever time change. So for them, now we're trying to like, okay, we need melatonin, hot cocoa so that they can go to sleep at the right time
Yeah.
and so that we can get up because then we have shoot around the next day and you only have so many or so much time to practice on that court that you've never practiced on before because they aren't in your conference and you didn't play them when you were out of conference, right? There's only so many games you can play. So I think like people really only see what's put in front of them, which is completely understandable. But when you see the behind the scenes, it's like it really is unreal to make it to the Sweet 16, Elite Eight, Final Four. Like those are high stakes, and it's not even just talking about like the national championship game. Like those are huge milestones that I think people miss.
Inside information right there, folks. That's why she's
Mm.
on board right there. You mentioned your first year going with Nova. What year was that when Notre Dame won? So 2019, 2018?
2018, I believe. Yeah.
Bumawale was that her name from Notre Dame, right? She's
Yep.
the one who hit
That's the year she hit the.
back-to-back buzzer beaters in the
Mhm.
Final Four national championship, right? So I told you earlier off air that someone at work asked me if I wanted to do a bracket challenge this year, and I said, "Are we doing the girls?" And they said, "No, boys." And I said, "I'm out because
Yeah.
the women's tournament is where it's at, and it's been like that for a while." And it goes back to like the Bumawale shots, and even you go further
Hmm.
down, the women's tournament year in and year out has just been, I think, a better product and more fun to watch. So that was not even that long ago when you played in as a freshman. Fast forward to where we are now, 4 or 5 years later. How much have you seen, like, with the difference in the tournament, just in terms of coverage, uh, quality, just the people that are invested in it? How much have you seen it grow, just like in this last 5 years?
Yeah, I mean the marketing aspect of it is unreal. Um, I think they have been smart and people who have invested in it have been smart enough to monetize it one in a certain way, right? Like there's all this talk on social media how we weren't women's basketball wasn't even allowed to use March Madness or like the elite, like that was the men's thing.
Right.
And now we are allowed to use that branding, one, which is huge, but two, it's like I don't know if you've seen like all the coaches that were getting those varsity jackets. Well, so like they came to Arizona, they'll sit down, they'll walk across campus with some of the top players on the team, they'll talk to the coaches. And I think even stuff like that, right? You're getting an inside scoop on the girls and the team and the behind the scenes, which I think people really want to see. And I think that's also what makes watching women's basketball a little bit more personable is like you kind of get about in like a behind the scenes on their life. In the same time, they aren't one and done like most of the men's play you really love to watch, right? They're one and done, they go to the NBA. So then they lose viewership that way. Whereas you now get to build, I hate to say like relationship, but you get to watch a player grow for 4 years and subconsciously like we love to watch that as humans, like we
Yeah.
love progress. So I think even in that aspect, and then when you have the level like freshmen from South Carolina, freshmen from Notre Dame, obviously you have Caitlin Clark, you have LSU, who I won't get too much into, but they're a little bit of like I call it just a dumpster fire, like
Yeah.
a magnificent dumpster fire that like can do well, but it's like a little bit of a shit show. Um, so you have all these different aspects, and you don't. Granted, South Carolina's been undefeated, but they almost lost to Tennessee, who was unranked. So it's certain things like that that I think makes women's basketball more exciting, especially in March than men's. Not to knock them, not
You
to,
can knock them. It's okay. We'll knock it all
but
day. We're here for the women's tournament. We're not doing a
yeah,
men's preview pod. We're doing a women's preview pod.
true. So
Yeah.
I would say that's like one of the biggest thing, even when you talk to fans like at Arizona who are diehard, right? It's like they want to commit to watching someone for 4 years. I think that gives it a different meaning than just like, oh, you see this kid come in and then they're done and then they move on and you might not hear about them that much.
Yeah. That's my biggest thing is like continuity. Like I'm a routine guy. I like routine. I like to know what I'm getting. And when it comes to college basketball, that's like one of the big appeals for the women's game is I know I'm going to see someone there for at least 4 years, although the transfer portal has changed things up a little bit this
Right.
year, which I want to get your take on as a player as well, right? So I see it from both sides. From a coach's side, if they're going to take the time to invest and recruit you and be on the recruiting trail and put that time and effort into building that relationship to get you to commit, I could see why a coach would want you to honor that commitment and be there for 4 years, right? But as a player, you know, if you're not an athlete, if you don't like your situation in school, you're allowed to leave and you can
Mhm.
go do your own thing and find your best situation for whatever reason. So I see both sides. All right. But I want to
Yes.
get your take as someone who has transferred. What's your take on the transfer portal? We don't see. I know there's a ton of women that are going into the transfer portal, but I don't
Mhm.
think it's as crazy as the men's game is right now.
Yeah.
I still think we're seeing more continuity on the women's side, but what's your take on the transfer portal for women's basketball? And is it a good thing or a bad thing?
I have a couple hot takes on it, but it's hard to necessarily speak on the transfer portal now because when I transferred, it was much more rigid and it was more difficult to transfer, hence like why I had to sit my first year at BU. Because
Yeah.
if you were to transfer D1 to D1, unless you got a waiver,
Get the city here, right?
yeah. So then I had to go through with lawyers and try and plead my case of why I think I deserve um, a waiver and all this and that. And then it just took so much effort, time, energy, all those sorts of things. Now it's like a walk in the park, depending on if you're transferring within conference. Um, the tough thing is, I think the recruiting process is pretty shallow right now in terms of, and I'm not speaking for everyone, but I think a lot of coaches, and I think this is what kids want to see, and I think this part is like a little bit tough, is they want to see all the glitz and the glam. They want, with NIL being as big as it is, they want to know where they're going to get the most money now. And I mean, I can speak from experience, and I won't say what program, but at a certain program I was a part of, we spent $12,000. And I know this is nothing compared to the men's, but we spent $12,000 on an official visit for one recruit. We rented out a skating rink. And it's like, and that wasn't even the half of it in
Yeah.
terms of like what coaches go through to get these players to commit. My thing is like, and maybe I'm just a little bit different, but like, and take it with a grain of salt because yes, I transferred from Villanova, but for different reasons. But I mainly picked Villanova because Harry was brutally honest with me. And he's like, you're not athletic, but you make up for it in other ways. And he was telling me all these other schools, like, I think you'd fit in great at DePaul. I think like this aspect of Duke would work well for you, or even Ohio State, like all these different places. And he was pushing me. And I'm like, okay, like he would connect me with the coaches, and some of them were already recruiting me, and I'd go on visits there. And I was like, this was after I had committed, and I'm like, Harry, why'd you do that? And he goes, I mean, this is the most profound thing he had said the whole time I was there, but he was like, because when you commit here, I want you to commit here because you want to come here, not because I persuaded you to come here.
I like that.
And to this day, I'm like, I would love for coaches to take that approach. Like, granted, I don't know if kids are honest enough with themselves sometimes to take that and still have a good relationship with that coach, or to know that it's coming from a good place, right? Like I know the intention behind it is good. And that's the reason he only had 2, 3 kids transfer in his whole 42 years of coaching.
Right.
Nowadays, granted, different times, but you see the overturn so quickly. But to answer your question of is it a good or a bad thing, I think I would say I'm indifferent to it, right? Like I've seen what good coaches can do for a program. I've seen what not so great coaches can do for a program. And
Yeah.
at the end of the day, they create the environment for the most part, and they're allowed to up and leave kind of whenever they want.
Yeah.
Whereas the players, like at least when I was transferring, it's like you have to go through a waiver, and if you transfer again, you have to sit out a year, and there's all these stipulations. Now I think it gives them a little bit of leeway. Um, I don't know. I think some kids use it for the right reasons. They want a different thing. They were overpromised something and underdelivered something, and I think they have the right to transfer then. But other times I think it's just about attitudes and wanting more playing time without having to work for it. So
That's
I'm
that's that's
indifferent.
that's why I have a hard time with it. Like for those reasons.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I'm indifferent to it in that aspect.
It's also added some excitement to the game, though, because you look at some of the better teams, like Haley Van Lith, when she said she was going to transfer and she wound up at LSU. I remember that being like a huge thing, right? Like
Yeah.
where's she going to wind up? And I think that has made it exciting too, especially the defending champs coming into the season here. But another reason why I think the game is kind of exploded is just the talent coming in. You look at this freshman class, like ESPN just released their
Hmm.
All American team, two freshmen, Juju Watkins from USC
Oh
and
yeah.
Hannah Hidalgo. Right. So you got freshmen that are just coming in and balling out. And this isn't anything new. I mean, Paige Beckers was player of the year as a freshman not too long ago, like
Right.
4 years ago. So what can you say about just this explosion of talent and these kids coming in just ready to hoop? Because, we've seen it more on the men's side, one and done, these big time freshmen coming in, not so much freshmen on the women's side coming in and just being All Americans right off the bat like that.
Yeah. I mean, I think once you saw someone had tweeted or commented about Hannah Hidalgo, and then I'm blanking on the freshman's name from South Carolina. But when you see them play at that level, and you have not only like Arike, when we played her at Notre Dame, she did a layup, and I swear, and I could be making this up. I swear she took off like from the free throw line up and under, laid it in, and I'm like, okay, she is just a different breed of like athlete. And I think she was really the only one that I noticed that year at that level. Granted, she wasn't a freshman, but at the same time, it's like, okay, it's not like you can have good athletes, but it's like, oh, they're a good shooter or whatever. I think the reason these freshmen stand out so much is because they're 3 level scorers, right? Like they can come down, hit the deep three. All right, you shut that down, you're trailing them on screens, all this and that. All right, they're crafty enough to get into the mid-range, stop short if they have someone step up, get to the lane, finish and one. But at the same time, it's like they're pretty good passers for the most part too. So you can't really take away any aspect of their game. I think that is unusual. And as many freshmen as we see right now at that level, like I think the fact that there are like those three off the top of my head who have come in and have like changed the game in their freshman year. I mean, one, right? It makes you excited to watch their next 3 years, but at the same time, it makes you excited, like, all right, what's coming behind them?
Yeah,
I think,
exactly.
I mean, that's the exciting part.
I wonder if we're going to see a change here in the not too distant future where, if the WNBA game continues to grow and with Caitlin Clark getting there, maybe more money coming their way. If there's more money opportunities earlier for some of these kids, so they don't stay the 4 years in college and we start seeing girls leave early and head to the WNBA. Like, I feel like that might be on the horizon at some point, especially if they're coming in ready to go like they are right now. But on top of just the overall talent, we talked about the freshman class, just a lot of depth in women's college basketball, right? Like the
Hmm.
days of like UConn and Tennessee every year in the Final Four, not so much. Like UConn, like I don't even know when the last time they won a national championship, but I feel like if you look at the brackets, seeds 1 through 4 in each region could make their way to a Final Four. You could have teams that are lower down, like Miami went on a run last year, unfortunately beating our girl Mackenzie in Indiana. But what can you say to the overall depth across the landscape right now, where you got it's not a two-team race anymore. It's like you got programs like South Carolina, LSU, all these programs that are just good and ready to go. Just overall depth. Just
Yeah.
inside information. What do you got for inside information?
I mean, I think so. Right now, it's really tough for UConn, at least. Like, yes, there is such depth, but at the same time, I think injuries are also so much more prevalent. Like UConn only has 8 players going into the postseason. At one point, Arizona only had 7 active players, right? So I think those things, like that was not the case however many years ago when UConn was winning national championships, right? They had their whole bench to pick from. So to your point of like depth, I think that is honestly such a game changer. And what separates the good teams from the great teams is having those bench players, right, who are ready to come off, ready for their number to be called, and are those spark plug kids, right? The whole idea of like star in your role to then become a star, like that whole mindset. And perfect example is, again, South Carolina, bringing them up so often, but they are an exemplary program in terms of they graduated all 5 of their starters,
Yeah.
right? And people were like, what's South Carolina going to do? This is going to be a rebuilding year for them. They haven't lost a game once again. And to understand that some of these kids were playing backup to those other kids, and now look at them. Like, you would think, how can't they start for South Carolina? Well, it's just about timing, about depth. Some kids, some years are better coming off the bench. I think those are huge things to keep in mind. And credit to Dawn in South Carolina for being able to build a culture where, you've been a star and you could go someplace else and be a starter and a star, but you want to come off the bench for one of the best coaches, one of the best programs, and make a difference while also learning from kids who are going to the WNBA or who are just great leaders and great people.
That's one of the cool things too, is like Don Staley went to a school that was not traditionally known as like a powerhouse, and she's built a powerhouse at South Carolina.
Right.
You just got like these programs that are just coming up right now. We've been talking for like 20 minutes and we haven't even talked about Caitlin Clark. That's how crazy the women's game is, but I feel like we should talk about her a little bit. So, I don't think it's anything new that college basketball has this player that just has a crazy season and kind of is the person to watch as the season goes on. We saw it with like Kelsey Plum when she was going for her scoring record a couple years back. I mean, even Paige Beckers as a freshman, like she was like a phenom. College basketball was kind of all focused on her. Sabrina when she was at Oregon. So we've had these players, these transcendent players. But what is it about Caitlin that is just taking things to a whole new level this year?
I think, one, the area. Two, I think right time, right place. Like, it's almost like for her, the stars have aligned in terms of the hype of women's basketball in general, along with her kind of being the face and forefront of that and them meeting together. I think that's the iconic part of witnessing this all happen, not to mention she's the all-time leading scorer now. Like, how often do you really get to witness something like that? As much as people may not like her, at the same time, like, I'm a big proponent of like credit where credit is due. This girl has been showing out consistently since her freshman year.
Yeah.
Not many people can say they've done that, right? Like, a lot of people hit these peaks and they have their best year. Maybe one year they get hurt, unfortunately, but she's been pretty even keel the whole time. I think that's one of the most impressive things, is to sustain numbers like that and build a program that wasn't really known before you got there. I think that's probably the most impressive part.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see what happens and if she makes the tournament run and gets the championship here. Hopefully we just get a fun tournament like we did last year with Iowa's run of the national championship game. So we'll see what happens. I
Yes.
mentioned we got a bunch of connections to the tournament this year, with just players participating.
Mm-hmm.
So 3 I want to hit. So we got obviously Maine getting in there. Bunch of Mainers on there: Sarah Talon, JC Christopher, Emmy Streams, all participating in the tournament. We got Anna DeWolfe, the great Anna DeWolfe at Notre Dame, finally getting to the big dance. So happy for her. And then your former teammate Mackenzie Holmes. So I want to hit on all 3. Where do you want to start? Which one of the 3?
I think Maine's closest. We can start Maine.
All right. So the Starting 5 podcast just came out yesterday, and they touched on a little bit about the America East, but just seeing Sarah Talon's improvement. I don't know if you watched the championship game and the America East title game last week, but she had a huge game, 12 points, 5 rebounds, maybe the block of the season. But just you could tell that she was ready for the moment. And it's good to kind of see her grow, and I'm excited to see what happens next year, because there's going to be plenty of playing opportunity and buckets for her to get next year. But I don't know if you have relationships with any of the girls at all. But
Yeah. Coached Sarah and JC a little bit for AAU.
yeah, and Sarah was on the opposite bench in the All-Star game last week.
Yeah, she was supposed to be on my side. I don't know what happened, but
yeah. Well, what can you say about Maine kids getting to the tournament as someone who's been there, who's won a tournament game? How great is it for not only them but the state to be able to see people from here being able to play for their home state team and get to the big dance?
I mean, I think it's incredible, right? Like you think tight knit community, you think supportive crowd. That's what I think Maine is for them. And I think it is very much a two-way street. And as much as I am so happy for those kids and they've done an unbelievable job, and I'm a huge fan of them and watching them play, I think so much credit needs to go to Coach Vashon. Like what she's been able to build there, the type of support she's been able to bring in, just how she conducts herself as a coach. Like, I don't know, watching her from afar, I'm like in awe of how she carries herself and how she has built this program up, right? It wasn't always normal for Maine kids to go to Maine, right? They thought they wanted to go like to bigger, better places. And I mean, she's taken that and completely turned it around. I think huge kudos to her. Um, One, I mean, her basketball knowledge is through the roof, but I think on top of that, she's an incredible person who connects well with the kids, right? Like who, in my opinion, granted, I haven't played for her, but like I'm thinking, who wouldn't want to like run through a brick wall for her? So,
Yeah, and it's you mentioned the main girl staying home. We got Maddie Fitzpatrick this year's Miss Basketball is heading up to Orono. She's
mhm.
staying home, and one of the things I've been really impressed with is their ability to recruit because Orono's not an easy place to get kids. I mean, it's tough enough to get kids in state to want to stay here and come play here, let alone when you're recruiting New England and you got to deal with UConn, who's in,
Yeah,
the, in your same recruiting area, some of these bigger schools. It's not easy, but they found a way to find players, bring them here. But the other really impressive thing has been their player development. You look at
yes,
Adriana Smith, who was player of the year last year, runner up this year, but like as a freshman, I didn't think she's going to make the jump that she did. Same thing with Ann Simon. I remember seeing Ann Simon as a freshman, be like, okay, that's a nice piece. I didn't think she was going to
yeah,
become the player she did. And go back to even Block Milan as a freshman. I remember watching her, like, okay, they got a piece, but she wound up becoming like one of the all-time greats here at Maine.
hmm,
So shout out to them for the way they recruit. They bring the right players in. And like you said, it's just a bunch of players that want to run through a wall for Coach Vashon. So she's doing something right, and they're back in the big dance. So shout out
yeah.
to our Black Bears. We got two more to talk about. We got your teammate, and we got Anna DeWolfe. So, do you want to talk Notre Dame or do you want to talk Indiana first?
We'll talk Notre Dame.
All right. So, shout out to the great Anna DeWolfe. And I got to be honest here. When I got big time hoops going, this was like back in 2020 was when I launched it. And the reason why I did it was I wanted to get back into the game. I've been away
Hmm.
for like 10 years and I just wanted to get involved somehow. Right. So, I was trying to find something to do to try to get plugged back in and be part of it. And so I missed like 10 years. So I had to go back and look up everything that pretty much happened in the 2010s. Outside of Gorm, because Lon is my guy, like anytime the state championship game was on, I'd watch you guys play, so I was familiar with Gorm and what had happened. But I was going back and looking at the missed basketballs from the past decade, and I was like, I don't see Mackenzie Names' name on here. And I was like, Anna DeWolfe, like who is Anna DeWolfe? And I got mad because I'm loyal to Gorm, right? So I'm doing
Yep.
my research, like who is this Anna DeWolfe? And then I saw pictures and she just looks like this little thing who's running around out there getting buckets, right? And I'm like, how
Yep.
the hell did she get Miss Basketball? But then I started watching her at Fordham. And then I became president of the Anna DeWolfe fan club, which I still am. And just to see what she's done, 1,800 points at Fordham, grad transfer, goes to Notre Dame, picked a great situation where because of injuries, she was able to slide in and get minutes right away.
Hmm.
But she's got a coach who just believes in her. Like Coach Ivy just seems like a really great coach to play for. Always pumping up Anna. You always see her encouraging her.
Hmm.
So couldn't be more happy for Anna and her journey. And I apologize to her for ever questioning why she was Miss Basketball. But I'm guessing you got a close relationship with her. You guys were firecrackers, probably came up together. So what can you say about the great Anna DeWolfe?
Yes. I mean, we did. It's funny you say that because I remember playing up on the older team for Firecrackers, and we would always go and support our younger Firecracker teams. I think we were playing in New York, might have been Gym Rat, I don't know, but she was wearing these pink basketball shoes, tiny little girl. She's bringing up the ball, and I'm like, Coach Clement, like, who is that? And you see her shift one girl, hesitate, get to the lane. And I can't remember what year she was, but she was young. And I'm like, and you can tell just in how she like carries herself on the court, like
Yeah.
she's a player.
Yeah.
Um, like not just one of those like camp kids who like comes in, you play hoops and you execute well. Like she creates, she's such a player. And then yeah, when you play with her, it's like a magician at work, and you might as well just be ready for the ball at all times because you never know when it's coming to you, and you think she can't find you, and
Yeah.
she can. Um, and to do it, and I hate to like ever bring like really height into it, but to do it at that level with her height, like, is such a testament to her skill set and her attention to detail. Like, I think, she's always been so, I guess, on point with those things and has always been a big proponent of those. Um, and then her attitude, right? For her, this to be her fifth year, and it really is like her story coming together and like peaking at the right time, like being able to leave Fordham the way she did, and now coming to a great program with one of the best coaches in the country who has coached at every level, including the NBA, right? So I think it just kind of, again, is one of those like Cinderella stories, regardless of how it ends, for it to work out the way it did is incredible.
I wish the folks that are like just now getting a chance to see her for the first time, because obviously Fordham wasn't on TV a whole lot during the time of Fordham. I
Yeah.
would find some random games like on CBS Sports, like on a Saturday afternoon, and be able to watch her. But for the most part, like fans probably in Maine didn't get a chance to see her play. They're getting a chance to see her now, but she's playing a role for Notre Dame,
Yeah.
right? Whereas at Fordham, like the system was built around her. And you talk
Yeah.
about just like go left, go right, sing, right foot, right hand, like step backs, like just
Yeah.
an absolute bucket. Like I wish fans could have seen her play and see everything she can do because she's filling a role right now. But I mean, she's got some good players around her, right? We mentioned Hannah Hidalgo,
Yes.
one of the best
Great
freshmen in the
players
country.
around her.
I remember watching some of the games early in the season, and I think it took some adjusting for Anna too, because you know Hannah is very good, right? She can get to the bucket, she can shoot, she's
Yeah.
a scorer, she's a theft when she plays defense. But might have forced one too many shots early on in the season. I remember just seeing like Anna in the corner sometimes, like this, like,
Yep.
and then just like putting her head down because Hannah wasn't passing her the ball, but they've kind of figured it out. So for folks that might not have been following Notre Dame basketball, they're a 2 seed. They're in the same region as Indiana, potential matchup in the Elite Eight. What
Hmm.
are Notre Dame's chances to come out of that region?
Um, I think it's tough with the teams you have in there. I mean, you have the first rank, I think that's the South Carolina region, right?
South Carolina's number 1 in that region.
Yep. So I think that's tough. The reason I say that, and it's funny, I just went to the ACC and SEC tournament, and you watch the difference in style of play. ACC is usually shifty guards. They can get to the rim well, right? They're pretty good shooters for the most part. They have a couple bigs, but that's not really their style of play. Whereas SEC is usually like banging basketball. They usually can't shoot the best, but they're crafty. They can get to the hoop, and they're great at pounding it inside and kind of working one or four out, one in, or sometimes doing the little high low duo. That's the tough thing about South Carolina is they can hit the three. They have athletes, again, can score at all three levels. And then you have Camilla in the post, like, she's a big girl. She's gonna get her buckets regardless what you do. So I think that's a very tough matchup. But for sure, I mean, again, it's March, and people scout differently, and sometimes people aren't used to the crossover in style of play.
Yeah.
So it's very much, like I said early on, a chess match. Like, all right, the coaching is pretty, as much as we talk about players executing and making plays, coaches, I mean, they play a big role at this time of the season.
Yeah. Yeah, I find it interesting too. They got the 2 seed, and they were kind of like 15 to 20 throughout the season in terms of the AP top 25, but they peaked at the right time, made a run in the
Hmm.
ACC tournament. Things seemed to turn around when they got Citron back. who was out earlier with an injury. So they're clicking at the right time. Man, I hope they go on a run, but they wouldn't have to play USC or South Carolina till the Elite Eight at the earliest. So they got a chance to run through some of those earlier rounds. The other one we got to talk about in that region, Indiana, former teammate of yours, someone named Mackenzie Holmes.
Mm-hmm.
So, first of all, maybe you can provide us some insight here. How is her knee? Because I'm not seeing much online. I think they're just, playing it safe, saying she's going to be fine. She's getting some rest. It's going to be all right. Do you have any insight on the health of her knee? That's why we brought you on. That's why we hired you.
I know, and I apologize. That I can tell you maybe a couple other teams who don't bet on them because they're missing some of their starters. I can maybe tell you that. This is a case where I do not have the inside scoop, probably for the best, but that really is how March works, right? Like sometimes they build it up. They want the unknown, right? That's another card you play. As much as it's on the court stuff happening, it's also like, okay, what are we releasing to the press? You have to give a statement sometimes. Other times, like it is what it is. So no, I cannot answer that.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
What can you tell us about Mackenzie? So obviously you guys go way back, teammates in high school, grew up together. Yesterday we just named Basketball Writers Association All-American for the second year in a row. Just an incredible career. I mean, can you be honest? Did you expect her to reach the levels that she's reached at this point in her career, where she was a first-team All-American last year? And like I said off air, like if it weren't for Caitlin Clark, she'd probably have a couple Big Ten Player of the Year awards. Might have been up for consideration for Player of the Year last year. Has she gone to a level that even you're kind of like, wow, like I didn't see this quite happening?
Yeah, I mean, and here's me being 100% honest. Like, playing with her, she's a damn good player. Like, sometimes it's like, just throw the ball into her. She's gonna figure something out, right? At the same time, like me being 2 years older, I'm seeing like what these other girls can do. So then I'm comparing and I'm like, we're in high school right now. She's getting recruited, and then she commits to Indiana. And I'm not thinking she can't do any of those things. But at the same time, like I couldn't even put into my mind or fathom that she's done these things because we've never seen it done from a player for Maine. Like, I think and again, we talked about being consistent, like with Caitlin Clark. Consistent numbers are very impressive at the D1 level. And for her to be part of a Power 5 program, like that's not normal in any sense. And like, again, how many, like it's a handful of players who can say they've done something of that nature or that they've been first team All-American, right? And maybe it's a little bit of me like having to fathom sometimes I'm like, how did we win like 42-0? Like, and I don't say this like in a, I don't know, arrogant way, but it felt relatively easy. And now, hindsight being 2020, I can look back and be like, well, it makes sense why it felt that way because we had freaking first team All-American, like running the floor, running the show, getting rebounds and beating her person down the court. It makes sense now. Like now I don't question it. So it's certain things like that to fathom that you played with a first team All-American and yeah, things make a little bit more sense. But my God, yeah, the consistency she's done it under. Again, very impressive.
Yeah, one of the things you just mentioned was her ability to run the floor, and that was one of the first things I noticed, like her freshman and sophomore years. Like she was beating everyone down the floor, like she was beating guards on the floor, getting breakaway layups. Like was she doing that at Gorham? Was she running because she's gone through a bit of a body transformation since high school. She's gotten incredible shape. She was built a little differently in high school. Was she still beating people down the floor and getting layups in high school?
I would say yes, maybe not as consistently. But at the same time, I mean, everyone innately has that time where, okay, they're a little fatigued and tired, and we're up 30 against a team, and it's like, all right, I don't have to run down the floor as hard as I can this time. Like, right? It's a little bit of that, I don't want to say playing down to the level of your competition, but like preserving your energy when you know you don't need as much against a certain team. But like so much credit to Coach Clement and Coach Briggs in the Firecracker program for hounding her in terms of, listen, Mackenzie, like you will get so many scholarships just because like teams want to be able to play fast. Like that's very much the start of transitioning to a very fast pace, play in transition, get quick buckets type game. Well, at the same time, if you're in a Power Five program, you need a post, ideally, that can play at that tempo. That, again, is something that's very rare. And in practice, the amount of sprints we did for Firecrackers was, I felt like I was on a track team personally. And to have a post to do that and to keep up with everyone, I mean, I know that they really focused on that with her. And then I think it was more so just her internal motivation and her discipline that she has to like know that that's what it's going to take at the next level. And I think she's excelled at that. I think that's kind of been, among many other things, her main mark.
I think the other thing that's impressed me most too is her growth as an offensive player at that level. Like I remember a freshman year, all rookie Big Ten team, but
Mhm.
was more of a supporting piece on that team. And I remember like earlier on in her career, like against some of these teams, like she'd have to guard like physical big players from the other team. Like I remember like Nas Hillman at Michigan,
Mhm.
or whenever they played UConn in the Sweet 16, and she had to guard Edwards, or it was a huge girl from North Carolina State a couple years ago. The girl's like 6'7",
NC State blonde
NC
girl,
State.
tall blonde
Yeah,
girl.
yeah.
Couldn't remember, but I know who
Anyway,
you're talking
that
about.
girl, but like she took a bunch of punishment, like having to defend all these big girls. And I feel like these last couple of years, we've seen her start to dish out punishment, getting
Mhm.
22 points a game, and that's kind of been crazy to see her growth as a scorer. Has that part surprised you at all? Because she's going to graduate as Indiana's all-time leading scorer in the girls program. Like, is that something else that's kind of impressed you? Her ability to translate to the next level, because she's not the biggest girl out there on most nights. She's
Yeah.
matched up against girls that got 2 or 3 inches on her. Has that surprised you? Her ability to score the ball at that level?
I think not her ability to necessarily score the ball, I think to go against bigger kids, because high school, rare. I don't think she really ever went against kids who were much taller than her. AAU, similar situation. Again, we played a lot of 5 out offenses in AAU. I'd say the most impressive thing is her ability to guard it. And I
Yeah.
think she has such an IQ now, which always give credit to my former teammate Jana Tucker, but like use her as an example. Like she was our 5th year, 6th year player, ranked 8th in the country coming out of high school, tore her ACL. She was still our best defender. It's not like she could move the best, but her knowledge of angles and how to play and where to be and like anticipation. I think Mackenzie has a little bit of that aspect in the post realm. And then at the same time, for like sometimes you have a defensive specialist, right? Like someone who really can get after it. It's a lot of effort. But then Mackenzie can go from that and produce on the offensive end. And that's more so, I think, she's always had elite footwork. Her ability to read the defense, to shift them, to get them to bite on an up and under, or to read it very well and just take advantage of it if they stay in their stance, right? Like those are things she is very good at. And she takes her time. It doesn't ever really look like she's rushed. She's pretty good at letting the game come to her. So I'd say those small details, like being able to play defense and then transition to offense and not lose any talent there. I think those are kind of the most impressive aspects.
Shout out to her left hand too. Like she might finish with her left hand better than anyone else in the country. Like folks might not realize she's right-handed, but she finishes
Yep.
so much left-handed. It's crazy. So they're the 4th seed in this region, right? I'm going to be completely honest. I think last year was their chance to make a run at a national championship, but health had something to do with that, with her banged up knee getting upset in the
Yep.
second round to Miami. But best case scenario, the best that Indiana can absolutely play is if Mackenzie's dominant on the inside and those snipers are knocking down threes and if they're raising hell on defense. We saw it
Yeah.
one time this year, and it was against Iowa at home when they just
Yep.
ran Iowa out the building. So that's their best case scenario. That's what they can do. But I think they got to do it for 6 games in a row to win a national championship here. What do you think?
Tough.
Yeah, yes, because we mentioned South Carolina's in their region.
Mm-hmm.
Notre Dame's in their region. Um, do you think they can make a run and get to a Final Four this year? Or do you think last year was their best chance?
I
'Cause
don't want to be pessimistic.
they definitely miss Berger because that's the
Yes.
one thing I've seen all season long is that when a play breaks down, they don't have anyone to go one-on-one and get a bucket. It always
Yeah.
needs to go to Mackenzie, then she kick it out to a sniper on the outside. So they definitely miss Berger, but what do you think? Can they make a run? Can everything go right?
I mean, it's tough when you meet up with South Carolina in the Sweet 16,
Yeah.
right? I think South Carolina matches their 3-point shooting abilities with even a little bit more athleticism. And as incredible as Mackenzie is, again, guarding Camilla, like for anyone, that's a tough matchup. Like that is a big girl to move around for 4 quarters consistently, right? And like, who's to say with her knee and whatever else that she would be even able to play the full game, right? So then you take her out, who's guarding their post player?
Yeah.
Who's able to like run in transition and keep up with the style and the pace at which South Carolina plays? That's my honest take and opinion. I think that is a very, very tough game. And I think, yeah, last year was probably their best year in terms of like everything working out. And then unfortunately, terrible circumstances kind of coming into play.
Right. Let's hope they at least get to the Sweet 16. Let's make a run of the Sweet 16 and see what happens
Yep,
against South Carolina. And you never know, one game to decide it all or to move on or go home. Who knows what could happen?
exactly. It is March.
Yeah. All right. So speaking of March, you have some inside information here. So a couple more things before we get up out of here. Inside information from our insiders. If someone hasn't filled out their bracket yet, they still have time because games don't really kick off until tomorrow. Who should they stay away from based off this inside information that you've got for us?
I would say Texas A&M is a little down right now. So maybe, I mean, I had them winning their first round. Now I'm questioning that a little bit. Nebraska's been peaking at the right time. So here's what I will say too, like a lot of my upsets came early on. So I think that's one of the biggest things. Texas A&M a little down and out. UConn, again, I told you they're limited the rest of the season to 8 players. When we talked about depth early on, this is still like you're playing games consistently, and it's not like you're in conference where you're like you're about to play the last ranked team next week, and so you can recover and you might not have to play the whole game. Now it's like, no, we need everyone at peak performance or the best they can give on a bad ankle or bad knee or whatever it may be during that game. So I'd say, I mean, UConn and Ohio State, I have them playing one another. So that would be an interesting game, but I'm thinking like in terms of longevity, USC peaking at the right time, right? Juju Watkins didn't have the best game against Stanford. She initially had 51 versus them the first game. I think,
Crazy.
yep, crazy freshman versus a top 10 team, top 5 team really in Stanford. Rematch happened, Pac-12 tournament. I think she had 2 points at halftime or going into the half. Unreal. So I think it's tough, right? Like now you have so many games to scout that I think people are going to look at how Stanford guarded her. If they can shut her down, that's huge. But at the same time, like Mackenzie Forbes, who transferred from Harvard, she's there, she steps up. So it's really about players stepping up in these situations, but something to look at. Depending on when LSU gets their guard back. Can't remember her name, but she went out on a stretcher in the SEC tournament. So depending on when she comes back from concussion protocol, she was one of their starters. I mean, hopefully we don't see anything like South Carolina LSU in terms of heated matches, but always a possibility when it comes to LSU and Kim Mulkey. Iowa is interesting, right? Like they've kind of ebbed and flowed this season in terms of they've had some really outstanding performances, and then for a while there they didn't even look like they'd be a Final Four team, according to Andrea Carter, who is great at analyzing the game and giving us a good inside scoop. So I think it's interesting. I will say for my Final Four, I have South Carolina, Stanford, Iowa, USC. Sounds very generic because I'm pretty sure they're all the one seeds.
You got a 2 seed in there. Stanford's a 2 seed, so you weren't going all number ones.
Stanford, who's one in there? Oh, Texas is one in that region. I think Stanford, you're correct. Yes. I think Stanford comes out of that. I think it's Utah and Stanford playing in the Elite Eight. Stanford comes out of that one, I think. And I need, with what happened last year to South Carolina, I think they get the national championship this year.
So I took away a couple things from your breakdown. One, you just not even looking at Maine, even coming close to an upset. You had Ohio State and UConn meeting up in what would be like the Sweet 16.
Yeah.
You're not worried about an upset there. So you're counting Maine out already. And then you have South Carolina clearly coming out of that region. So no love for Mackenzie or Anna.
No, there's love. I'm just being realistic with, I'm saying a prayer that night because that is a tough team to beat, regardless of if you have the dominant and incredible either Anna DeWolfe on your team or Mackenzie Holmes.
Listen, that's why we brought you on, to be the insider. We don't need no bullshit. We need you to just cut straight.
Exactly. I'm never going to give you fluff or, I'll keep it straight up.
This is great. This is great stuff. So you said you got South Carolina winning it all.
Yeah.
It sounds like you got a lot of love for South Carolina. What is your team? What is your program? I mean, obviously you played for a couple, but do you have a program that you call yours? I'm supporting mine right here. Go Blue, Michigan. We're in there somewhere. The women's team made it, but
I would say I don't. Being removed and having, right, like so many kids transferred out of Arizona last year that, I had a teammate at Georgia Tech, one at Miami, one at Virginia, Anna at Notre Dame, Iowa, Texas A&M, like all these different teams, TCU, West Virginia. So I think I have so many friends and colleagues, different places. I'm rooting for them all. I just call me a bandwagon fan, whatever you want. But South Carolina, how their team works together. I mean, it's just impressive basketball to watch.
Yeah.
And I think my biggest thing is it's admirable that Dawn Staley has an incredible freshman that she keeps, it sounds so wrong to say, keeps in check, but I don't mean in a bad way, but holds her accountable, right? Like she knows she's an unreal player, but at the same time, she's willing to hold her accountable. Her attitude, check her attitude, right? And all these different things, because she really does. She wants to produce and embrace creating great people from her program. And I think that's what has had, I mean, you also see the relationship she has with Asia Wilson still to this day.
Yeah.
And Asia graduated how many years ago? I think, I don't know, being able to witness that as a former athlete and then really seeing the behind the scenes of college athletics, and as much it is relationship based, it's also very business oriented, unfortunately. And then you bring NIL into it. I think there's so many factors that make it very hard for Dawn to do this, have an undefeated season, back to back with completely different starting lineup. I don't know. I'm just very impressed by that.
I'm anxious to see what happens. I really am. I think that's and all the things you just mentioned. That's what makes this so exciting. That's what makes this time of year so exciting. And look, if history tells us anything, just go back and look at the last 10 Final Fours. They've all been crazy. They've all had their moments. So it's gonna be fun to watch. I'm gonna make one pick. Michigan over Kansas in the 8-9 game in the first round.
I think I had that.
And then Michigan is going to knock off USC in the second round because I just don't think Juju's season enough. I think she's going to catch the jitters. First NCAA tournament run. Michigan
Okay.
over USC in the second round. I'm gonna go with that. I'm gonna put that one out there officially. That's my big upset pick.
All right. I'll take you on that one.
I don't have any inside information. I'm just a homer, and I'm going with blue.
Okay.
Do you have anything else you want to hit on before we get up out of here? This was good. I think we got a big time needs to sign you to a multi-year deal here before ESPN comes calling and puts you on staff.
Oh, please. Yeah. If you can use this as whatever the analysts use for their kind of tape,
Yep,
let's go ahead with that. No, I'm just kidding.
good to go.
Um, no, I think we've covered just about everything. I've let as much information go as I think I can. Um, so yeah, I'm feeling good. I'll send you my bracket so you can keep me updated and we'll see how the USC Michigan game goes.
We'll do that. We'll put your bracket out there to the fans so they can see just how legit of an insider you are here and see what happens. But
Oh boy, yeah, watch you get shattered first week every game wrong.
well, look, whenever Maine beats Ohio State right off the bat here on I think it's Friday, then
Yeah, true.
it's over for you.
Coach Vashon, we know how she can put up a good scheme against the team. I mean, the fact they went head to head with Indiana. So, I mean, yeah, can't really count them out, but
See what
had to
happens.
make a 50-50 decision on that one.
All kinds of great games coming up here, guys. So make sure you're tuning in and watching the women's NCAA tournament. We're not promoting the men's tournament at all. Strictly women's game here. So, and Emily, thanks for doing this. Had a good time. We might have to run it back and do a WNBA pre-draft pod.
I am totally up for that. I'll try and get some more detailed inside scoops and see how much I can let go.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the draft. I haven't seen Mac on any of the mock drafts as of late, which has me a little concerned. I know she's gonna get picked up anyway. Some team's gonna pick her up. She might not get drafted, but she's gonna be in the league. But I think a little pre-draft pod might be in the works here because we got the college insider. We got all the info, ladies and gentlemen. Shout out to Emily Esposito for coming through on the NCAA Women's Preview Pod. And stay tuned. Maybe we got some more fun stuff coming up. To all of our Maine girls in the tournament, best of luck. We'll be watching. Thanks for listening, folks, and we'll see you next time on the Big Time Hoops the podcast.